Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and inspire you to start, finish, and publish your book. I'm Mark DeVoe.
And I'm Mark State. And as always, a huge thank you to all those people out there who keep this podcast on the road by supporting us with a little bit of cash. And in return, they get all sorts of amazing stuff. So if you pop over to bestsellerexperiment.com/support, you can discover how you can become a chart topper supporter on Patreon. And if you do that, you get access to over 130 deep dive episodes. And what's a deep dive episode, you may ask? Well, this is where we take one subject and we dig deep. We have a right go at it. So in recent episodes, we've had Kelly Weeks talking about marketing. Kelly's worked for some of the biggest publishers in the UK. Kelsey E. Myers, who's an expert in search engine optimization. That's getting yourself found online. We had Tim Lott, a brilliant novelist. Tim Lott talking about how to write a novel. And just last week, we had Paul Austin Ardoin talking about how to make $1,000 a month as an indie author. It's based on his book. All this and much, much more. And also, if you go to the academy, you get me and Mr. D as your one-to-one tutors. You get an amazing community. You get all these incredible courses. So, it's all there, folks. It's all there. Just grab it.
Absolutely. Mr. Stay. I'm buzzing this week after our chats last week about writing and ideas. It's like it's unleashed the Kraken.
Release the Kraken.
I almost said unleash the crackers and a bit of cheese, but that would make the writing experience a bit more like a Wallet and Gromit film. But I'm feeling really inspired. Do you know how you go through these kind of and every writer must have this. You just have some moments where you're just absolutely fired up and you think this is it, and it's like, right, you've got to kind of take that energy and you've got to kind of like convert it into words. Do you know that experience?
Yes. Harness it because it won't last forever.
it's like I'm harnessing it, and it's like I just can't stop writing right now. And but the biggest challenge I've got, and I think a lot of people, whether you're writing fiction, non-fiction, I think the biggest challenge I'm realizing as a writer is that we're drawn to writing partly because we love writing. We like to tell a story, but we also have probably pretty creative imaginations. And it's how do you stop that creativity from giving you 30,000 different ideas? And then your creativity goes into trying to solve the riddle as to which one to write about. So that's really where I'm at still. It's like thinking, like it's something about like you're thinking about longevity of life and thinking I could not physically write all of these books in my lifetime, even if they did some crazy cryogenic AI thing where you could keep writing in your frozen state. But do you know what I mean? It's like, what do you do? How do you pick the thing to write about today and tomorrow?
It's funny you should say that. But I mean, this is one of the things where an agent comes in really, really handy, because I'm working with the writer Rowan Coleman. We've been writing scripts together, and we came out of a whole bunch of ideas for TV shows and movies. And we went to our agent and just said, okay, which ones are the goers? Which ones do you think you could sell that could get us meetings and blah, blah, blah. So, our agent gave us some feedback, and those are like the 3 or 4 that we're now going to focus on and maybe make, put up into pitches and hopefully get some meetings off the back of it. So having some external expertise, which I know, you've got plans for this, haven't you, Mr. D? You're going to consult the hive mind, aren't you?
The Oracle. Yeah, I think what I'm going to do is, because we've got with the BXP team, such a brilliant group of people. Yeah, we call it the hive mind in some ways, don't we? Because there's such a breadth of. So I'm going to chuck it out there. I'm going to ask them this week. We'll report back on the podcast what ensues in terms of banter. But I'm going to ask them what I should write about. Like, what is it of all the different things? It's weird because in some ways, when you pick as a fiction writer and you pick a genre and you say, right, I want to write fantasy, you instantly, I mean, it is narrowing it down. It's not really, because there's like, then you've got fantasy and you've got to narrow that down. But the whole point of like self-help, personal development, that whole like self-improvement, living your dreams, living on purpose, getting out of a hole, whatever it might be. It's like, it's the human experience, isn't it? And that's
exactly,
area.
I'm going to write about life.
Well, that's the weird thing. Do you know what? I mean, I've got literally, that's one of the topics that I'm thinking of focusing on. I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding you. I have a book title.
I'll save you all the hassle. The answer is 42. Okay,
exactly.
That's the answer.
That should be, there'd be a brilliant book if someone did that. Something about life, and it's like a 200-page book, and all the pages are blank, and on page 42 there's just big page 42 number. 42. That's it. Everything else is blank. I'm sure that's been done. But so yeah, watch your space, folks. I'm gonna pitch out there. But yeah, if you wanna pitch into the conversation, if there's anything, I mean, this is a request to our listeners. If there's anything that you particularly enjoyed that we focus on here, and you think, yeah, it'd be kind of fun to have that distilled into a book from a kind of a life perspective, personal development, non-fiction, then let us know. Drop us a note. I'll be interested to get your feedback. Open to feedback right now. But Mr. Say, we have a brilliant interview today, and we've done quite a few interviews of people who have collaborated. I mean, this is like the mammoth of collaborations, but this was the first time I can remember in 450 plus episodes where one of our guests has actually referenced Back to Reality, the book that we wrote, which is ironic in an interview about collaboration. But is that the first time that an author has actually referenced, and actually obviously read our book?
It might be. Weirdly, I did a radio interview this morning, Academy Radio, which is a FM station in Folkestone, because I'm doing a talk down there in a couple of weeks. And it was lovely because Kay, the DJ there, she's read, and she said, "Oh, I love that Back to Magic."
For anyone that's new to the podcast, Mark's written a book called End of Magic. We wrote a book together called Back to Reality. Well, it could have been worse, Mark. It could have been the end of reality. The end of reality. Robot Magic. That sounds like the follow-up to some like fairy unicorn novel. You could be onto something there. Oh my gosh. But yeah, it was brilliant, and it's an interesting one because this interview that you're about to hear reminded me of you and I, Mark, when we published Back to Reality and we went and did interviews on other podcasts and radio stations, and just the enthusiasm and excitement. But listen in, folks. I mean, let's introduce our guests.
Yeah, such a great pair of guests. It says Heide Goody and Iain Grant. They've been writing together since 2011, and they've written across multiple genres. But there was always a laugh in there. There's always a bit of comedy. They're both Midlands-based and probably best known for the Clovenhoof series, which is a series where Satan is made redundant from hell and sent to live in Birmingham. I mean, this is a great premise. Anyway, recently they've launched a cozy crime series, which is called the Cozy Craft Mysteries, under a pen name as Millie Ravensworth. And incidentally, they're both married, but not to each other. And also, and I just want to bring this up because this is brilliant, Iain might be familiar to readers in the UK, as he recently featured in a news story that went a bit viral. He was on holiday and he ordered a takeaway curry online, only to turn up at the curry house and it had shut down. I'm going to put a link in the show notes because there's a brilliant photo of Iain doing that sort of sad man with an empty plate photo. It's so funny. Anyway,
so random.
We discuss the benefits of having a writing partner, how being a writer is an excuse to ask and do anything, and how they ended up as writers in residence of a telephone box.
Brilliant. So let's dive in. This is completely bonkers, folks. Let's dive in and listen to the lovely interview with Mark chatting with Heide Goody and Iain Grant. Heide Goody and Iain Grant, welcome to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today?
Very well, thank you.
Wonderful. Very good indeed. Thanks for asking. And wonderful to see, because I keep seeing you at conventions and events and all sorts of stuff. And, I'm just blown away by what you've done together as a writing team. And let's go back to the start and we'll talk about all the exciting new things that are coming on the horizon as well. Now, as I understand it, you've been writing together since 2011. And this all came about because someone asked a question at the Birmingham Writers Group. Can you tell us how you two started working together?
So we were both members of Birmingham Writers Group. We've both chaired the group on occasion. It's a great writers group, and we enjoyed it so much. And I think at the point this all came about, we knew each other's work quite well for a couple of years at least. And then we did a workshop. It wasn't run by us, it was run by somebody else on collaborations. And right at the end of the workshop, it was super interesting. We talked through all of the different models and the famous people that have done it. Right at the end of the workshop, the facilitator said, is there anybody here that would like to work in collaboration? And Iain and I were both practically jumping out of our seats. And nobody else was. It was really strange to me that we were the only ones enthused by the idea. And then still it took a week. I think it was a week after that. I sent Iain an email, really tentative email. Do you want to do something together? Because I felt and still feel actually that Iain's a more accomplished writer than I am. And it's like, oh my God, he's going to say no and it will be so embarrassing. And it was like asking somebody out on a date, actually. I was really nervous.
And I think it's interesting because we've both been writing on and off for quite a long time before that. And I certainly had written a few novels. And Heide had written a novel prior to that. And so, we both brought our own, writing to this collaboration. But I think we both very quickly saw that there are huge advantages of working with somebody else. Not least of all, obviously writing is for the initial part is quite a solitary business. You are doing something by yourself with your own self-doubts going, am I writing a load of nonsense here? What is this? What is this thing? Does anyone like it? And I think having another person to work with who kind of goes, yeah, that's really good. Do more of that. And especially when it comes to comedy, I think, you'd be aware of this too, Mark, that if you're writing something funny, there's that very big doubt of kind of, am I the only one who will find this funny? And so having someone else kind of going, yeah, I like what you did there. Let's do more of it. So we both very quickly saw an advantage, if only for our own mental well-being, to working together, I think. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about how that process started and how it's developed. And I know, because I've been looking at old interviews that you've done, and you do get asked this every single interview. So apologies to listeners who've heard this before, and apologies to you two for having to ask you this again. And also, listeners, they've literally written a book on the subject called How to Write a Collaborative Novel. So I'll put a link in the show notes. You can check that out as well. But how do you work together? How does the process work?
It's endlessly fascinating to us how that's evolved for us. And, we're just two people. I think it'll be different for everybody that writes together. One of the big takeaways from the entirety of our career together is that we very much believe that having the same work ethic is key to all of this. Right. If one of us was a little bit of a slacker or, less invested in the thing, it would have fallen apart. But we are both super invested in it, and we really want to write more books and, sell more books and all of those things. But the model itself, it's changed hugely. We've tried literally, if you can think of a way of writing the book together, we've probably tried it. Right. And so we've found the things that suit us. Iain, I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, because we started off with our first book together, Clovenhoof, where Satan loses his job and has to go live in Birmingham. And because we came together, an interesting point about collaboration is that we need to look at what do we both like? What do we both like writing? What do we both like reading? There are Venn diagrams for writers about, what do I want to write? What am I good at writing? All those things. And you got to mush those together. And we both liked fantasy, and we both liked comedy. So batted ideas around. So we started on this Satan in Suburbia comedy. And our model for that one essentially was we roughly set out the novel as 12 chunks. And then what we would each do is we'd each plot a chapter, and then we give it to the other one to write, and then give it back to the original person to edit. So one person would be working on chapter one, planned by one person, written by the other, then back to the other one to edit, whilst the other one's working on chapter, I think it'd probably be 6, And so then you kind of like work your way in a sort of a hopscotch way through the entire novel. I think Clovenhoof, that gives it an unavoidably episodic feel because, and in that sense, it works perfectly fine because effectively it's a sitcom. It's a sitcom with 12 episodes. But obviously that requires us to know significantly in advance what we're going to write. And that was probably one of our most structured approaches. And I think as we've gone through and got more comfortable, we've taken a different kind of angle to it. And there have been novels where one of us has led the way and the other one has followed behind,
Right.
filling in, expanding, editing. And I think that's been different things for us. So, for instance, we did the Odd Job series, which was a urban fantasy set in Birmingham about a government department fighting Cthulhu-like horrors from beyond. And I led the way with that one, and Heidi followed behind. And then we looked at the more of the crime work we've done recently, which tends to have been Heidi has led the way, and I followed on behind. I think part of that as well is we've tried our best to play to our strengths as we've gone along, because every writer brings something different to the table, definitely.
You mentioned 12 chunks there. You didn't say chapters, chunks. So are you talking about sort of story beats there in terms of, maybe something like the hero's journey? Is there some sort of template there that you're working towards, or?
Iain will have much to say on this, because if one of us is a plotter, it's Iain. If one of us is a pantser, it's me.
Oh.
And we kind of smush our methods together in a kind of in various frameworks. Iain knows what I think of the hero's journey.
I'm not a fan either.
No, I'll let Iain talk about the hero's journey, actually, because it has its place. There's no doubt about it.
The thing is, yes, and I think with chunks, and probably one of our mistakes with Clovenhoof, or one of our things that, it was a learning thing for us, we made those chunks into chapters. It was a book with 12 chapters,
right?
Which actually, the average reader does not want to read a 5,000 word chapter necessarily. They perhaps want a bit, So our structure was more rigid there. And, we've always tried to create these arcs. We have we tend to work on, we plan conversation and we draw these weird webs with plot points, it's like a flow diagram almost of story. And sometimes we have pantsed our way through an entire book, and then, we have to fight our way to make the ending work. Famously to us, there was one book which we planned the hell out of, Jaffel Incorporated, based on a dream Heidi had about people renting out parts of their brain to a data company in exchange for internet access. And we planned the heck out of that book. And it got to the point where we kind of go, right, it's chapter 54, the B story, the romance must happen now. No, it must happen now. And I think that's the closest, we've never really argued, have we? But it's the closest we came to hating our work, because we got sucked in by our own planning to the extent that we deprived ourselves of freedom. And I think there's something there that structure, there are many structural approaches to writing. I love the hero's journey. And yes, that's probably because as a child, I loved Star Wars, I loved George Lucas, therefore I love Joseph Campbell, therefore I love the hero's journey. Even though actually, really, it's just one way of approaching story. And I think as well, it's obviously from Joseph Campbell's perspective, not just because it's called the hero's journey, but there's a certain male narrative going on there. And I think actually it doesn't do all the things you want it to do. We've looked at a number of structural things. I think there's some things we've really picked up along the way. Obviously, 3-act structure helps us just understand our books. But one of the things we've really worked towards is kind of this Maslow's hierarchy of needs approach to story, and almost this caveman approach to story. I think you introduced me to that, didn't you, Heidi? This idea of the caveman kind of desires within stories.
Yeah, I can't remember. I didn't invent it. I feel as though that was Keith Lindsay is somebody that we've worked with in the past. He's a writer of sitcoms and a very funny guy, actually. And he says that if you are writing about emotional needs that a character has, if a caveman can understand it, it's a really basic need, then the readers will love it. It's why we don't get those books about enterprise architects or investment bankers so much, because nobody really cares about those slightly less understandable jobs or worries that we have in the world. So yes, we try and stick to the needs of the caveman. If you think about, I guess everybody is familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but we have at the very bottom of our hierarchy of needs, we have the need for food and shelter. And then, we move on to love and so on. So if we can take away as many things or threaten as many things as possible for our characters, then we can drive a really intense narrative and comedy also.
I think that's it, because it was Keith Lindsay, and again, it's not new to him, but he said to us, the role of the writer is to, chase their characters up a tree and then throw rocks at them. Yeah. And, this idea that actually chasing your characters up a tree is like chasing your characters down the hierarchy of needs. You strip away their status, their love, their security. Hopefully you're not going to starve them to death necessarily, unless it's that kind of book. But that ultimately, if you're going to create drama, you drive in that direction, you do those things. And that's a structural thing. There is a journey. But it was, sorry, we stopped just naming other people, but it was Kurt Vonnegut. So I think basically he went, basic story is a person that falls in a hole and tries to get out of it again. That's it. So, those things have driven us. But again, I think we have recognized there's a balance between planning fiercely, dictatorially, and actually having that freedom to write what we want to write.
It is a fine line, isn't it? Because, I've collaborated, and it's important that you're both singing from the same hymn sheet, but have the freedom to go off the path a little bit as well. And as you said, you've rarely argued, so what's, how are you communicating with each other? Is it like this? Is it over Zoom? Are you having story meetings? Are you brainstorming beforehand, or is it all done on text? How are you brainstorming these ideas?
The one thing that we never do is write in the same room. We write remotely, but we do planning meetings. We have often, we'll sit in a cafe, and we have been known to be quite annoying to the patrons in the cafe with our big bits of paper and our loud talking and our raucous laughter. But we'll do that and thrash out the type of thing that's coming up, whether it's the overall, structure of the next novel, or we might focus in on the next chunk that we're writing. So we do also, we love Dropbox. Dropbox is the thing that lets us keep tabs on what we're both doing. And we started a chat document. It's a kind of daily chat document because we realized that I was sending way too many emails during the day, and it's a bit annoying. So we just keep it all in a document now, and we have just, here's a thought, here's an idea, I have a question, we collect all of those into a single document.
Yeah, and we used to with our books. Essentially for every chapter we'd have what we called a go crazy document. So basically, I don't know. So writing the next book in the Clovenhoof series, and Clovenhoof goes on holiday to Spain, and you go, right, go crazy. What's going to happen? Right. And I don't know. He's going to, cook the biggest pot of paella. He's going to pick a fight with somebody on a beach. But we just throw ideas down and expand it and elaborate and do those kinds of things. I think you get to that point. It's probably worth very much pointing out here that although Heidi and I are married, we're not married to each other. And I think our respective spouses kind of just look at us with this kind of weird weariness, to be honest. But I think we've got to that point now, quite frighteningly, where we're kind of reading each other's thoughts a lot anyway, So once we start going down a certain path, the other one goes, aha, I know what I can do here. We can expand and we can change. And we can build up in that kind of way. So our brainstorming, I think it's very organic. It's a lot of just. I'm one of these people who actually, if I'm having a conversation that is of value, I tend to have to be face to face usually. I don't know. I'm not a very good auditory learner or something. So, face to face stuff. And if it's not written down afterwards, it has to be written down. I need to get something on paper. So a lot of what we do is having, just wild and crazy chats, and then remembering what the heck we said, and then putting it down and exploring from there. And that's how I think that's very much how we brainstorm. But you have this business of, we were discussing earlier about Heidi, you like picking up random things, like whether it's off the street or from tip shops or whatever. A writer's life is an eclectic thing. You go along and you see anything and go, oh, that's interesting. We're currently doing some research for some London-based detective novels at the moment. Should be out in the autumn 2023. And we were at a book launch last weekend, and a woman came up. I was mentioning that with these London novels. She said, "Oh, I'm a member of the Parliamentary Choir. The House of Parliament has a choir of its own. Who knew? And anyone who belongs to the House of Parliament can be part of the choir." And you immediately go, I'm stealing that. We are having that. It's, and so it's a very eclectic approach. And sometimes, and this is tough for all writers, you have to go, do I want to put this thing in because it's going to amuse me, or does it actually genuinely belong in the story? And that's when you start getting into genre and actually the needs and expectations of the story. Because sometimes you have to take a good long look at yourself and go, no, that doesn't belong. No matter how much fun it is, it doesn't belong. So yes, brainstorming. Yeah, that's not where we're going there.
Sorry. I was just going to say that the sandpit approach, which is, the Go Crazy document, has been really a useful framing for I think the tension that we sometimes get. We said that Jaffa-Link we overplanned, and I find it crushing actually. Once we've got a thing written down, like here's the structure, here's what we're going to write, it kills a little bit of creativity in my head. So the sandpit approach is really useful, and we try and build that in at every stage if we can. Right.
Yes. Yeah, that's a very good point, because there are things that we're sometimes not happy. I'm probably the one who gives the rules, I'm afraid to say. So, we're writing one of our Clovenhoof novels, religious comedy, and Heidi goes, "Can we have a Yeti in it?" And part of me kind of goes, right, Christian mythology does not contain Yetis, and I'm kind of going, no, and I think, and sometimes what we also do, and we're both guilty of this, is we come up with a wonderful idea to put in a series, and then we stop and go, oh, hang on, this belongs in this other series. That's a so-and-so idea. That belongs here. And we have to recognize where things belong.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. And it is, you're clearly doing something right, because you've written over 30 novels together, I believe.
Yep, that's correct.
That's where we are at the moment, at the time of recording. By the time this comes out, there will be more. Now, was it always the plan to indie publish as well?
I at the point where I only wrote one novel before we started writing together. And at the point where I'd got that in my little hot hand, I was desperate to indie publish it. I could see what was happening. I could wrap my head around it technically, and it seemed like such an exciting thing that I was super keen on that. I didn't even want to contemplate going around and looking at agents and publishers. It just seemed to me like the most exciting thing imaginable. Yeah. But then I had to persuade Iain.
you did have to persuade me, and I think that's interesting that for the most part, Heidi, you've been very good at spotting where the direction of publishing and trends are going. So and it was much to my disadvantage. I happened to have a literary agent back in 1990, whatever. So therefore I went, I have an agent. This is how things work. Didn't get a book published through them. Nothing ever happened, but I assumed that this was it. This is the way you did stuff. And I think we were publishing our first novel together, Clovenhoof, in 2012. And even in the 10 years it's been since then, publishing has changed very much. And I think if we could take ourselves in a little time machine as the people we are now back to 2012, we would by now be absolute millionaires, because we could see that Kindle publishing, fast turnaround Kindle publishing around about 10 years ago was a direct route to getting a great audience. Obviously, the market, as always with these things, it's become more saturated, it's become nuanced, it's changed. It's not the same as it was, but actually being, a self-published author in the early 2010s was absolutely the right direction to go in. And I think, that I'm very glad that Heidi persuaded me of that fact. I was of that kind of opinion now, and I know very few people are still these days, but of the opinion now, at the time, that indie publishing was giving up, was kind of going, if you can't get properly published, therefore, you go for second best, get indie published, which wasn't true then. I was wrong, and it's not true now. And therefore, I needed talking round, and it was absolutely the right thing to do. And the freedom it offered was fantastic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, you've run across various genres. You do have this kind of, there is an eclecticism to it. What have you found that's been working and what's not worked for you? What are the biggest lessons that you've learned along the way?
So it's one of the truths we've learned about our writing selves over the years is that we obviously crave variety, in the things that we write. We love comedy. We don't really want to move away from comedy because that works for us. And I think it's in relatively short supply too. So we write comedy, but we have written across a great many genres. We started off with Clovenhoof, fantasy comedy. We wrote Odd Jobs, which was fantasy horror comedy, a little bit more. But then I got, I remember this so clearly, Iain. We were driving back from a convention together, and in the car, I said, do you know what I'd really love to write is some crime, like some comedy crime, some outrageous comedy crime like Carl Hyacin writes, that Florida whack job stuff. And we talked about it and we went, yeah, let's do that. And so we wrote a series of books set in Skegness because we decided that Skegness is the closest that Britain can offer to Florida. And we actually, one day we'd like to see a literary twinning because, that's a thing. So yes, we've, and we know for a fact that we do ourselves no favors at all when we write across genres because we have a core of fans. We definitely have a core of fans who will read the things that we write because they like them. But of course, the core of fans that we have, I don't know how many, if it's dozens or hundreds of people, that's not enough to put food on the table. We need to be selling to genre fans. And genre fans, when they see our books and are also bought on Amazon, as you know, are a key thing to discoverability. And ours are a big old mess because, if you see the also boughts for Clovenhoof, they'll include crime books, and it's not a clear path if you're trying to sell to fantasy fans or to crime fans because they just go, what is this? So I think, yes, I don't know what your thoughts are, Iain, but that would be one of the biggest learning points, I guess.
Yeah, I think that what readers want generally, readers are individually wonderful, unique, intelligent human beings, who have very nuanced needs and desires. But as a mass, readers want more of the same thing that you did before, please. Exactly the same, please, but ever so slightly different. Now, that's not reflection on individual readers because they are very complex human beings, but as an entire thing. So, for instance, arguably, since the Clovenhoof series has been a success for the last 10 years, it's been very nice and we very much enjoyed it. We should have just written 20 Clovenhoof books. And that would probably, have done as well. That switching genres because we feel a need inside us hasn't necessarily helped ourselves particularly. Also, I would argue, despite our desires as writers, one-off books, standalone books, tend to be oddities, and there's a struggle with pitching them and selling them. We've written some standalone books that we're wonderfully proud of. Jaff Link, the one about renting our Bishop Brain. Lovely story. Even though we hated writing it, it turned out fantastic. We wrote a werewolf horror road trip story, A Heart in the Right Place, which I think, I'm still waiting for that Netflix deal, it's lovely, but it's a standalone. And readership generally wants a continuation of things. And I think there's something there that you need to address. So that actually we don't want to confuse readers by just because readers will follow you. But there's a point at which they won't follow you.
I wonder how much of that is the Amazon algorithm being a bit dumb. Maybe with AI, we may find that it gets a bit smarter and realizes, because I read different stuff all the time. We know you read different stuff all the time. We know that people aren't just crime writers who read this author over and over again, but that's how the Amazon algorithm works. So maybe when it gets a bit smarter, you guys, because I have the same problem. I also boughts are all over the place. So I'm kind of hoping that maybe when AI kicks in, we might be quids in. Who knows? Yeah. We can hope.
Because a really good example, this predates Amazon, is, for instance, I know that we all are big fans of Terry Pratchett, wonderful writer. And there are some huge Terry Pratchett fans who have never read his 2 science fiction novels.
Yeah.
And you kind of go, I think they're wonderful books. They're very early works. You can see the joins and all that kind of stuff. But they're lovely books.
Yeah.
but they're not Discworld books. So, readers can make some very specific choices. And I think that is interesting that, that's the way we are. And yes, I think, AI is an algorithm is an interesting one, because obviously we generally talk about them as a sort of as a threat thing. But actually, one of the things that I think, and I'm talking years ago now, drew me to Amazon, as a purchaser, was it did have a vague idea what I'd quite like. And you go, why don't you try this? And I think, we can just get, because this business of pseudonyms or, publishing things in different ways is an artificial means of getting around that pre-existing problem of how books are recommended to us. So, yes, you're probably right. The landscape changes continuously.
Yes, you heard it here first, folks. Well, let's talk about the next phase, because you have experimented with a new pseudonym, the Millie Ravensworth Cozy Craft Mysteries. Tell us about those, and because the covers look amazing, and it does seem to me seems to tick every kind of box for that kind of cozy crime genre. So where did these come from, and tell us how they're going?
A couple of things came together, I think, because a few people read our Sam Applewhite books, The Skegness Crime, and said, "Oh, it's cozy crime," because Sam's a female amateur sleuth. There's no police procedural in there. And yet, it quite clearly isn't cozy, because we've got baddies who get horribly mutilated, and there's alligators. And then, so we thought, well, that is interesting. Could we perhaps lean into the cozy crime genre a little bit more? And one of the other factors that drew me to that was because cozy crime often comes with crafts. And I particularly enjoy sewing. And so I thought, well, I wonder if we could build on that. Can we use the sewing and have a cozy crime series with sewing? And so that's what we decided to do. And we had so much fun, actually. Iain is responsible for picking the location, because we thought that a cute location was key. And we really enjoyed writing them.
Yeah. So we set the Cozy Craft Mysteries in the town of Birmingham in Suffolk, which is actually where my wife's family are from. And we're part of us finding so much set books, because regional crime is kind of popular at the moment. Crime set within specific, well-defined geographical areas does appeal. Suffolk not entirely overlooked, but was a reasonable place to look at. And so that we thought that would work in terms of our cozy setting. And I think there's something important to say about cozy crime, or low violence crime, as it's sometimes referred to, is that there are genres out there that are very lax and fluid. Science fiction covers all manner of areas. Fantasy can go, anywhere it likes. But cozy crime, and I think I'd put this adjacent to romance in this regard, most of the readers have some very specific expectations of the genre. There are rules of the genre. And working within those is actually very interesting. There's actually, you kind of go, right, here, we're going to play a game. We're going to play in this sandpit of story, but here are the rules that we have to follow when we're in it. And it will include things like no swearing, no vulgarity, a lot of things that went straight into our Clovenhoof books. None of that, no nudity. There's going to be death, because there are going to be mysteries, there are going to be murders, but we are not going to see violence in its extreme form. And there's these things that very much define the genre. And also within that, actually within cozy crime, there's some brilliant cozy crime mysteries, as in the mystery itself is fantastic, but it's a very character-driven genre that people actually want to read and luxuriate in the place and the characters rather than that. So there's a lot of things that were just interesting opportunities. And I think that appealed to me because, again, I'm the planner. I'm the one who structures. So it's a puzzle. It's a mental puzzle of how we make the pieces work together. But I think we were able to really play to our personal strengths, both our creativity and our organizational kind of approach to things to create something. So we looked at that, and part of that then was the recognition that our also boughts our algorithms, from Amazon, they just would be a disservice to us. Because if someone read a cozy crime story set in Twee, I'm going to use the word Twee there. It's not Twee, it's a lovely town, but in a pleasant Suffolk town, and then go and read our book about Satan in Suburbia, which frankly is like the worst kind of 1970s vulgar sitcom. We're going to both offend and alienate readers. It's not going to make sense. So we looked at taking on a pseudonym. Heidi, do you remember the process by which we even picked our pseudonym?
I'm quite certain it involved a spreadsheet because where Iain is, spreadsheets follow.
I think no, we did. Maybe I did. Well, I think we pretty much researched. We did like a list of like the top 500 people writing in the genre and analysed their names. There's a heck of a lot of Marys involved in cozy crime, and I think we came up with a combination of about 50 names that we thought, picked up by a spreadsheet, and we just voted on them. I think that's what we did. I remember Heidi had her heart set on our pseudonym being called Moxie. But I felt, Moxie wasn't quite, as a first name, Moxie Ravensworth.
Moxie's quite a good name. I like
It's a good name. Look out for that when our science fiction books come out, I think, yeah. But so we literally thought about, right, who is the persona, the character, or at least the name character of our pseudonym. But that was principally that we were looking to approach it from a clean slate as new writers. At the time of recording, we have not officially told any of our readers of our existing works that, we have these other books out there. So 5 books we've been beavering away at. And obviously writers, we love to share on social media. Oh, look at my cover, or coming next year. And it was none of that. Everything under wraps. So we've kept that very quiet in the hope of not messing with algorithms.
Yeah.
We're not the greatest at keeping quiet about things, I should say. It's been
Well, at the time of recording, I think there are 4 out. I think by the time this comes out, there might be a 5th or even a 6th. So it's the Millie Ravensworth series. So I think maybe we should come back to this in a year's time or whatever and just see how that's, and see how that's gone. And you mentioned that there was a science fiction series. I think there's a time travel series coming as well. How much can you tell us about those?
The time travel novellas, we were just slightly we needed an outlet for the rudeness, actually, the vulgarity that we can't put in the cozies. We actually did write a Clovenhoof book in between writing the cozies as well, because there's clearly a need in us to do the outrageous slapstick and the silliness that comes out in Clovenhoof. But we wondered whether a series of shorter works, because we have in the past put out fairly regular novellas, usually based on topical things. Clovenhoof reacting to the pandemic, Clovenhoof reacting to Brexit. So we know that actually those sell quite well. So we thought, what if we had a brand new series that was deliberately short, and we would just write them when we have a bit of time. And I have to say we've ploughed some of the same turf that you ploughed in your End of Magic, I think, because
right.
Have I got the right book? I've got the right book where she goes back and does some Adele songs or
Back to Reality.
Back to Reality. Sorry. Yes,
yeah.
Yes. I one of your yes. Edit that part out where I got the middle.
I get confused myself.
But yes, we realised that there's loads of fun in going back to the 17th century, because one of our characters is a witch and they rescue her from being burned at the stake. And then, we can go back to more recent times and meet David Bowie before he was famous, and we can do all of those things. So yes, we can see that series running just as we feel like writing it, which is kind of the palate cleanser that we'd envisaged.
And yet, actually, I think that series also has highlighted those differences of approach to storytelling we have. Because the moment I hear time travel, my brain goes, what kind of time travel? How does time travel work? Because, you can have the approach where, time is fixed and anything you go back to change cannot be changed because it has already happened. There is one set. You've got the branching trousers of time approach involving parallel worlds and things. We've got time as a river where you can change it, but everything kind of comes back and forth. And Heidi just took one look at me and went, no, we're just doing some time travel stuff. So I know for myself, I had to invent an in-world rationale where we could do all of these versions of time travel, because, I love time travel movies. I love time travel telly, but most of them, if you stop to think about it, the whole grandfather paradox, it doesn't make sense, and I need a world that makes sense to me, even if it is stupid. So we had to devise, I had to devise for myself a rationale as to how and why this would work. Which has led us on to quantum sheep, I think, was the guiding principle of our time travel world. We have to make things that work for us. That's been a lot of fun, just being able to have something to explore and do. Not least because we do find that we need these outlets for certain types of our writing creatively at different points.
Absolutely. Now, when you started out together, you've had, amazing success. The Clovenhoof, I think, was TV interested in that as well. But could you ever have imagined that you would be writers in residence of a telephone box? Tell us about that.
This speaks to, I think, why, how the definition of marketing, if you ask a marketing person, it's probably different than the definition that's in my head, because the definition that's in my head is, marketing. That's like attention seeking, right? So yeah, one of the things that I like to wrap my head around is getting attention on our work. Obviously, marketing is much more numbers driven, much more analytical, and that's the stuff where I'm less brilliant. But we have a telephone box just up the road here, and it's been adopted by the parish council, and it's just sitting there. And so I asked the parish council, can we please be writers in residence? And having asked that question of a room full of people, they go, "What? What do you mean? What? Why?" So I just elaborated on it a little bit more and said, you don't have to do anything. You just have to say so and have to let us take pictures and generally, lark about in it. And they said yes. And so, and it's a position for life, as far as I'm concerned. Nobody else is allowed. It's not time bound. So yes, we are writers in residence of the phone box up the road. I've since run a project to install a defibrillator in it because, got to give back to the community. But
I think this is a bigger point here, because one of the things writing has enabled us to do, it's a wonderful thing about being a writer, is you've got an excuse to do almost anything when you're a writer. It's like, yesterday I was Googling how to burn a house down. Now, a normal person would be worried about that, but I'm kind of going, it's fine, I need to know how to burn a house down. And it gives you a freedom to ask for things that you wouldn't normally ask for. And one of the, I think, genuine takeaways from being a writer is that, and this is Heidi more than me doing this, if you just ask for stuff, more often than not, you'll just get it.
Yeah.
So, we wrote some Sam Applewhite books last year, and there was going to be a tank in it. So I got in touch with the Tank Museum and just went, can we come and have a look around your tanks, please? Because we want to, write about one. And they went, yeah, come along. And you just get to go. I mean, you could have paid to go visit anyway, but, you just get invited to come and see stuff. We were in Palace of Westminster last week. And again, this is Heidi more than me. We wanted to, in a book, murder somebody and conceal their body in the Palace of Westminster. Now, normally you can't go up to UK Parliament security and go, if I was going to murder somebody and hide them here, where would I put it? But no, if you go, I'm a right, and that, again, I'm going to argue that guy was too helpful. There's a point at which somebody would go, hang on, But, if you want to explore, you want to do things, you want to prance about and make a fool of yourself for the purposes of attention, actually, funnily enough, the world will let you. And
I remember a time.
No, go on, sorry.
I rang up Severn Trent because I wanted to know if there were sewers beneath Sutton Coldfield where Clovenhoof lives. Can we walk through the sewers there? Are they big ones like you see on the films? Of course they're not. So they gave us the idea of storm drains and other things. But I can't believe I got on the phone to a Severn Trent engineer. They've got, leaks to be fixing, but they wasted time talking to us about nonsense. It was brilliant.
And it leads into that peculiar thing with writing, because I said earlier on that one of the problems with being a writer by yourself is the solitary aspect. It appeals to the introvert in you that, you want to sit in a room and play with worlds inside your head and put them on paper. But for most writers, there comes that point later on where the world says, right, you need to promote this thing. Go out and be a performing clown in public. So it's kind of these two. You don't have to do both those elements, but there's very much this sense of, the sense that there's a public side of yourself as well, which you need to present, which, let's face it, we quite enjoy, don't we? Mm. Last year we were very lucky. We were invited to be guest speakers at Lituanicon, which is Lithuania's premier science fiction and fantasy convention. We kind of go, how have you even heard of us? But we went along and just spent time with people, explain, because there was the tentacle thing, wasn't it, Heidi?
Oh, that was just one of the best. I can't tell you how brilliant that was, because some years ago, we don't necessarily have to relive the whole thing, but we decided after the Odd Jobs books came out, Tentacled Horrors, Living in the Canals of Birmingham, we decided that wouldn't it be funny to fake a monster sighting in the canals of Birmingham? So I love nothing more than the excuse to make a thing. So I made a giant tentacle. It was, if you can picture, I can't remember if it was a pool noodle or the insulation that you put around pipes. I think it was a mishmash of both. Anyway, it was made out of that, carved into shape, wire reinforcement in the centre, and suckers and spray painted. It was a thing of beauty. Oh, it didn't only have wire up the middle, it had fishing line attached to it, so we could suspend it or we could hold it on a stick. It was a very versatile prop, actually. So we used it to take some brilliant photos. Iain and I met at 6 o'clock in the morning in the middle of Birmingham to go and mess about in the canals. And we got the most stunning pictures. We failed to go viral. I mean, none of that worked, but we just had the best fun. And so when we did our presentation at Lituanicon, it was hidden cities, because the theme of the convention was cities. So we did a presentation on hidden cities and some of the amazing fantasy locations that you can either visit or invent. And so the tale of this tentacle seemed as though it fitted within that. And because of, completeness, I took the tentacle along in the incredibly strict Ryanair, luggage allowance. I managed to squish the thing into a suitcase, and I kept it at the back of the stage while we were doing our thing. And I said to the audience, I bet you'd like to know what happened to the tentacle. And I went and fetched it out the bag, and there was a lady, I could have kissed her, on the front row who went, "No way!" really loudly, and like kind of, it was like I'd planted her there. And they were genuinely thrilled to see the real tentacle, having, had me wibble on about it for 15 minutes.
150 excited Lithuanians, because you bring on a tentacle. Woo!
Fantastic.
I mean, they just had Ben Aronovich on beforehand, but no, it was the tentacle that got the cheer, and it's...
That's the dream, isn't it? Upstaging Ben Aronovich with a tentacle. We've all wanted to do it. Now, you mentioned this is very much writing can be a solitary occupation, and you have both written solo novels. I think, Heidi, you did The $1 Million Dress before you started writing together, and Iain, you write as Iain M. Grant. Any plans to write solo, or will you always be working together as a team?
We know which side our bread is buttered. Our joint efforts definitely work better. We did a rewrite of The $1 Million Dress as a Goody and Grant book, just because it seemed like a decent thing to do. So yeah, we both bring value. I believe we both bring value that we couldn't do without.
Yes, absolutely. It is one of those things where the entity is greater than the sum of its parts. I think we both have things that we want to do ourselves. We have stories that burn inside us. And although we find an outlet for them generally, I think we just know full well that when we write a part, it doesn't function in the same way. And I think there's an element there that, I don't want to press on the marriage analogy, but, we do smooth off the roughest edges from each other. That's what we do. It's a bit like that. Again, it's like the Venn diagram thing of, what you like, what you want to write and so on. The Venn diagram of us together presents a nicer picture than the Venn diagram of us apart. It's a better thing entirely. And I think we do recognize that within us that, sometimes we burn to write or create a thing. And we often create these things sometimes, but, in terms of professional projects, Heidi is working on a wonderful project at the moment. It's mostly solo. It's maybe a joint thing, called Mansplainia. I think that, it says itself. And there's this wonderful character. I'm sorry, I don't want to, spoil it, Heidi, before you've revealed it, because Heidi does like to make things. Because is it made from an old Spit the dog?
No.
It looks like it because I know you, but this wonderful wig and a lovely dodgy moustache, and I think there's a plan to do some guerrilla filming in IKEA at some point as the man from Mansplainia. Is that? I don't know, Heidi.
That was a project, and it's not the first project born out of frustration. Being mansplained to by a really annoying guy who cut off our internet, and it came from a core of molten rage, and I still need to be sure that it is valid and worth doing, because a core of molten rage isn't always the best basis for a thing. But yes, I think the man from Mansplainia is something that we'll definitely tinker with. And I had so much fun making the wig. The Spit the Dog reference, my uncle is Bob Carolgees, and so Spit the Dog is a relative. He's like a cousin or something, I don't know, but. Yes, and I just happen to have, for reasons, some of the plush fur that looks just like Spit the Dog. And we discovered, purely by chance when I was doing something else ridiculous, that if I put on a big moustache and eyes, I actually look quite like my uncle. And it's not a thing I'm proud to say, but I do.
Well, look, we're running out of time, and I just want to spend the rest of the day talking about Bob Carolgees and Spit the Dog, but we are going to have to wrap it up there. Iain and Heidi, it's been amazing talking to you, and I think we will circle back to Millie Ravensworth at some point, and all the incredible projects that you've got coming. Folks, we'll put a link in the show notes where you can discover more, because you give presentations at festivals and conventions, and some of those you've got as resources on your website, and I think they're really, really useful, particularly about writing comedy. And we haven't even touched on that, so maybe we can talk about that on a future date. But for the moment, Heidi and Iain, thanks so much for speaking to us, and hope to speak to you again soon.
Thank you.
Okay.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. Oh, you could just tell that I just remember those times when we were doing interviews, they're just riffing off each other. And we've now learned the secret to why these podcasts are so long. It's because collaboration, and this is a collaboration right now. And again, it's really hard to, we just want, there's so much to share through the experience of collaboration. And you kind of don't really talk about it whilst you're collaborating. You kind of like just collaborate and you work out your methodologies and stuff. But once you finish the book, it's so exciting to kind of look back and and kind of think about all of the experiences. But isn't it amazing that Heidi and Iain have been, well, firstly, that they've been going so long? I think, often you hear about a couple of authors who pair together, they try a book and then they go back to their own writing. But this has become their de facto way of writing books, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's I think it's testament to their working methods and the way the working method has evolved. In the extended version, we're going to sort of dig down into writing as a team, writing as a pair, and what's worked for us and what's worked for me as a screenwriter as well, and what worked for Heidi and Iain. But I think the fact is they've never let it get stagnant. They've never ended up doing the same thing over and over again. And they've rolled with the punches as well. They've realized the standalones don't work necessarily, but they still do them, I think, in order to retain their sanity as well. They're not constantly writing to market. They're not writing something that's they think we'll do this just because it's going to sell. They do it because they love it. And I think I first met them at WorldCon in Dublin a few years ago. I mean, we knew each other online, but it's the first time, and they are so much fun just to chat with, in person. And they're friends with Queeve McDonnell as well. So they're just fun people to be around as well. Also, before we go any further, Heidi's uncle is Bob Carroll G's. That came out of left field.
I know, just slip that into the conversation.
I think we might need to explain that to non-UK listeners. So
yeah.
Bob Carroll G's is a performer who has a puppet character called Spit the Dog, which was I first encountered on a show called Tiz Was.
Yes.
Back in the late 70s, early 80s, which was a absolutely anarchic children's program, and Spit the Dog would just spit at people. That's it. That's the joke. But it was really, when you're 8 years old, it's the funniest thing ever.
Ventriloquism. It's a dog that sat on his arm. And actually, if anyone's watching YouTube, if they're seeing Mark's I don't know what you call it, microphone fluffy thing. That kind of reminds me of Spit the Dog bit and Bob. Yeah. But it would sit in the crook of the arm, wouldn't it? And it just spat. It didn't say anything, but it was a very naughty dog. Yeah, exactly like that. But so random, absolutely random. But I think it'd be worth diving into this idea of cozy crime, because that is a really big, I think, obviously with Thursday Murder Club has been, internationally successful with Richard Osman. I think there's a lot of people looking at cozy crime now. But what I found interesting was this definition that they talked about the rules of cozy crime, which I'd never really heard before. No nudity, no swearing, and low violence. I like that. I like the idea of low violence. Like there's a point where a lot of authors, when they're doing crime or horror novels, it's like, how do you take this really horrible thing and make it like 10 times worse?
Yes, exactly.
Right? Whereas with cozy crime, it's about taking something awful that happened and being able to have it work in a kind of an old person's home, with a quilting magazine on the table. So it's a great kind of parameter boundary for people writing it. And I think cozy crime's popular now because a lot of people are, we see all the horrors out in the world, or the news, I should say. I never want to kind of think of it as the world, because it's just the media's reporting of that. But all the things we hear about on the media, there's so much of that in reality that I wonder whether that's why cozy crime is like a bit of a return to sanity, or a return to a safe haven place for people who just want to read a book and get away from all of that.
Yeah, and one of the big rules of cozy crime is, the perpetrator gets their just desserts. They're arrested and taken away at the end as well. When I was a bookseller, we'd very often get, particularly around Christmas time, when people are buying gifts for other people, and they would say, I need a crime novel for my gran or for my mum or my aunt or whatever. It was very often they were buying for a woman in the family, and they would say lots of juicy murders but no sex. So it was that kind of concept of cozy crime has been around. I mean, essentially, it's Agatha Christie in a way it led the way with this. But what you're seeing a lot more, I think, what Heidi and Iain have tapped into as well, is this idea of tying it in with craft as well. Heidi was saying, she loves craft, she makes things, and she's tied it in with that too. But yeah, it is interesting. You've got the any sex and violence is off stage, it's over there. Very often the person solving the crime isn't a police officer. They are,
kind of a layman who's just
exactly, yeah. They're part of a group, or they might know a copper. They might know someone who can help them out.
I think that's the genius in it, though, isn't it? That's the genius in it, because anyone reading the book could be that person. It's not like you have to have special skills. Like Thursday Murder Club was all about a group of people who kind of were in a kind of a retired residence, and they all just got together and met up and they tried to solve crimes together. But they were just, they're just like, your average everyday people.
Yeah, so often it's the unassuming, like the Miss Marple, Hetty Wainthropp, Jessica Fletcher. They are the unassuming person that, Father Brown, the G.K. Chesterton ones as well, which I read when I was a kid as well. It's this unassuming character that always gets overlooked, who's there in the corner, like the reader, observing, taking it all in, and then coming up with the solution. So you're absolutely right. I think there's so much. We're bombarded with so much turmoil through that sort of news media, that to have something where, yes, a terrible thing happens, someone is murdered, but it's in a universe where it's resolved, everything ties up neatly at the end, and you get to do some craft or work in a bookshop or coffee or whatever it is.
Exactly. So, it's the genius in it is the actual title of the genre as well. The word cozy. That for me is the thing that makes this work. I mean, if you said like cottage crime or seaside crime, or it wouldn't work. But the word cozy just works, doesn't it? It does what it says on the tin, and it's a go-to in many ways. And I know that this genre is going to run, and it's going to become.
Oh, it's going absolutely nowhere.
It's been going for quite a few years as well, hasn't it? I mean, it's not like it's been around like you say, the concept of it has been around for a long time, but it's because of that genre name that came about. And I'm curious as to the history as to how that, if you know how the word cozy crime, who wrote the first cozy crime novel, maybe it's defined somewhere. But the point that it's come along, it's stuck, and it's now something for people to hang their hat on, say, I want to write a cozy crime novel. And instantly you've got your rule base. And that we always talk about this, Mark, don't we? That to actually write something, and I talked about this at the beginning of the podcast, like when you've got 1,000,001 options, it's the hardest block to actually getting started. Whereas the minute you say cozy crime and you've got a rule base, kind of like the hero's journey as well, you've got a rule base, instantly puts you into a little box where you can be infinitely creative within a small space. And that, I think, is key to making progress on a book.
I think what Heide and Iain were talking about was matching those reader expectations, which weirdly, the most recent deep dive we've done with Paul Austin Ardoin, he's got this book out about making $1,000 a month as an indie author. And he said the big light bulb moment for him was this thing about meeting reader expectations. So each genre, this isn't writing to market, but when you're writing in a particular genre, the reader comes to that genre expecting certain elements. There are things they are going to want from that. And it's kind of up to you. If you want it to be commercial, it's up to you to deliver those elements in a way that's entertaining. And I think Heide and Iain, I mean, you just look, they're 6 books into the series. I think the next one, The Scarecrow Murders, is coming out later 2023. So 6 books into the series. So that a definite sign that people want more.
Talking of needs, I was fascinated by the discussion around Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And that was something that, if anyone's ever done psychology or studied any kind of personal development books, that's like, usually, chapter 1, learning about the kind of the needs. And if you've never come across it, I know it's quite a common thing, but it's not everyone will have necessarily linked up with it. It's a fascinating kind of pyramid diagram, which talks about that we have certain needs in life as human beings, and we can't really get to the next level until we've satisfied the needs. And so we've got base needs of like food and shelter, and self-actualization, which is the top of the pyramid. You can't be doing that when you've got to be paying the mortgage, and the house is burning down and the kids are running around screaming. But I love the idea of taking this model and using it to really understand as Iain said, stripping your character of their hierarchy of needs. It's a real way of getting to the base level of what the core emotional and physical and physiological needs are of a human being. He talked about taking a character, chasing it up a tree and throwing rocks at it, which is kind of like, it reminded me of a Calvin and Hobbes episode. But I think it's really interesting to kind of think of a character in terms, I mean, we can just say, oh yeah, think of your character's needs. But when you use the hierarchy of needs, it gives you a model. Again, okay, what are we talking about here? Do they have love? Do they have food? Do they have shelter? What are they trying to aspire to become through their own journey? And that really works for me. It's a brilliant model, which I think we should be looking into more as writers.
It's really interesting. I've known about it, but I've never really looked into it. And listeners, I'll put a link in the show notes so you can have a look at this pyramid, because the bottom is physiological needs, then safety needs, love and belonging, esteem, and as you say at the top, self-actualization, which is the desire to become the most that one can be. And as I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, at the bottom, these physiological needs, which are air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, the absolute essentials. Then above that is safety needs, personal security, employment, resources, health, property. Those feel like genre needs, okay? So that sounds like thrillers and science fiction and fantasy, taps into all of those. And then above that, you've got love and belonging, friendship, intimacy, family, sense of connection. Well, that's romance, isn't it? That's romance and contemporary fiction where people are talking, novels about friends or lovers or what have you. And then when you get to esteem and self-actualization, that feels like literary fiction to me. That's where it explores, people who are usually going through some kind of inner turmoil, some inner journey. So it seems to me that if you want to write genre stuff, you go for those essentials, the psychological needs, the life and death kind of stakes. And then when you get further up, you're talking about love and romance and those important things. And then when you get to the top, it's self-actualization, which is, just feels like every literary novel I've ever read, So it's, I'd never really, I knew of it, but I'd never really put it together before.
That's an interesting angle, actually. Yeah, I've not looked at it like that before. I think the journey as well, there's a journey that everyone goes through in life, and with the hierarchy of needs, we can go up and down those needs, depending, like if you're, for example, you're in love, you've got everything sorted at the base level, and then you've fallen in love, and then you're kind of moving up the hierarchy, and then there's an earthquake and your house collapses. Well, you're back at the bottom of the, you can't think about having a loving relationship with somebody when you're running around trying to save the kids. It's like there's all kinds of different. So it's an ever changing journey. But it's this idea of aspiring to kind of get those things in place, and then you can kind of really focus on the next level. And it's just it's a very interesting. Maslow was he wrote an incredible amount on this. There's tons of stuff. I mean, we're going back a few years now, but definitely worth looking into. Now, let's also talk about this idea of writers having a free pass, because we've talked about this very much when we were writing Back to Reality. Going and being knocking on, you talked to surgeons, bus drivers, all kinds. We've also heard a lot of authors who come on this show that have, there's one of our Academy members who went and spent the day on a sheep farm, sheep shearing. And I mean, you get all kinds of experiences. And I think of, going up the mountain with a yak, chasing you like with a guide. I mean, there's all kinds of crazy stuff you could do. It just struck me that what a fun idea for a novel. The premise being a writer who just basically wants to do all the fun stuff. It's not actually writing a book at all, and just blags their way through where the Buckingham Palace, the White House.
Out of my way, I'm a novelist.
But it's true though, isn't it, Mark? You've experienced this, like something about the excitement of being asked by an author to be told something or to show someone around who's writing a book. And I wonder if it comes from the fact that you think, oh, this might end up in the book, or I might even end up the book as the the person that's showing them around the museum or something.
Well, very often I find that, because whenever I speak to experts in the field, my opening line is, what does everyone get wrong about what you do? And they love that. because they're like, oh, great, yeah. Whenever I watch this show, that's blah blah blah. They suddenly you're on their side. You're going to try and get it right, and people. It really helps people open up. And I think people are generally very willing to share their experiences with you in order to get things right, in order to set the record straight, so that's always helpful. And it does open doors, for my next book, The Holly King, I went to the Royal Mail archive up in London and was looking at stuff there because one of my characters is a postman, a 1940 postman. So that was great. I'm sure I've mentioned before on the podcast the time that we got into the Stanley Kubrick archives.
Oh yeah,
in the Elephant and Castle, because we said, we're writing a book, which I think one of my friends was thinking about writing a book, but we all went along and got to see everything that was in a massive exhibition a few months later. so yeah, it can open doors, if you write a polite letter or an email or what have you. And yeah, why not? I mean, I'm going down to Dungeness in a few weeks as well to do some research down there for the next book, the book after the next book. So it does open doors, and it might go to your head a bit, but I'm sure let's set a challenge. Who can get into Buckingham Palace?
Yeah, I want any author who's ever done anything
the White House,
out of the ordinary,
the Pentagon.
I know, literally any author who's ever done anything on the premise of writing a book and had a brilliant day out and a great experience. Let us know. We want to document these. This could become another theme on the podcast. So, drop us a note, go to the website, click on the contact us button and send Mark and I an email, or come to the Facebook page, or Twitter, and if it's still going, and let us know. So who knows, or whatever the new Facebook version of Twitter, Threads, I think. If you've got a Threads account, stick it on there, and then we'll find that when we set one of those up, whenever that will be. But I think it's really fun to kind of look at that. And I also think for the deep dive, Mark, we are really going to delve deep on collaboration, because it's what we did. It's really the premise of how this podcast started. If you're new to the podcast, Mark and I spent the first year of this podcast collaborating on writing a book for a year, Back to Reality. And so we run the gamut with this. And the thing that I loved about what Iain and Heide talked about is how they finished the interview is this idea about writing better together, that they had this experience whereby yes, they write together and they write separately, but their de facto has become writing together. And I just think this might inspire authors out there. Yeah. If you're an author who has struggled to write a book by yourself and you're stuck, collaboration could be, the first step just to getting that book written, finished, and giving you that confidence to then keep going. Or it might actually end up being the thing that you do long term, like Heide and Iain. So if you haven't done it, you've got to listen to this extended, because we're gonna unveil some of the secrets, talk a lot more. We're going to go deeper into playing to each other's strengths, similar work ethics, the magic of spreadsheets. We're going to talk about same but different, like how do you deliver what the reader wants. So if you'd like to support the podcast and get access to the extended, go to bestsellerexperiment.com/support and sign up, and then you can join Mark and I to riff on this for a good old while. So welcome to the extended edition, folks. And this is a special on collaboration. And for those of you that have read Back to Reality, for those of you who listened to the first year of the podcast, you know that Mark and I have been down this journey. I loved hearing their exciting enthusiasm, Mark, because it reminded me of when we'd just published Back to Reality and we were doing interviews. And it's fun to kind of do that with someone else, isn't it? It's like, it's a joint experience, and it makes it bigger than the sum of the parts in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, I've co-written with you. I've co-written with John on screenplays. I've co-written with a guy called Paddy Easton on another screenplay. I've co-written with Rowan Coleman on a couple of projects, and it's always an enriching experience. I do like to have the best of both worlds. I do like to have my own thing and do my own stuff. But it's like, I guess it's like, you go jamming with another musician, then you come back and you've always learned something from it. So but the thing that I don't think I've heard any other collaborators talk about, but the thing that we did, and I've done with every writer that I've worked with, the first thing is we draft up a memo of understanding. Right. So this is going to be, it might sound a bit scary, but it's just whenever, particularly if it's a mate, if it's a friend of yours and there's ever money involved, there's nothing more. We've all seen, Smeagol and Deagle in Lord of the Rings and how two brothers were torn apart by a ring. If you're going to work with a mate, especially if you're working with a mate, draft up a little memo of understanding, which is as simple as saying, okay, you and I are going to embark on this project. We're going to split all the money 50-50. This is and we won't do anything without the say-so of the other. We won't embark on we're not going to sell the rights. We're not going to do anything without consulting one another. It's as simple as that. Half a page, and you both sign it and then you file it away and it's done and you both know exactly where you stand. So that's the first thing I would do. And I know that people out there, oh, my mate won't do that to me kind of thing, but it's just a grounding,
Even if they wouldn't do it, by writing that document, you've basically got a common understanding.
Yeah, exactly.
And the great thing about those documents is once they're written, you never have to refer to them again.
Exactly. I've forgotten.
Right.
The only time filed away somewhere. Yeah.
The only time you ever have to refer to something is when it's not been written. And then you have to try and refer back to a conversation that you had in a drunken state 3 weeks before you started writing about what you said and what I said. And and actually, Mark, the proof's in the pudding. Every single successful band that has ever walked this earth and had a career that went to their deathbeds rather than after their first successful album. And I'm thinking Rolling Stones, U2, Coldplay. I know you love those guys. But they all have this agreement in place before they start, and they usually split everything completely equally, because that's the other thing. It's that 50-50 split. It then means that you've got to show up and put in your part. And yes, however that ends up looking, it sets an expectation of, it's a partnership. It's two people doing, the same amount of work, be it in different ways often. But I think it's completely crucial to the success of the book. It really is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially if it's really successful, because the problem is when it's really successful and there's a lot of money to be divvied up, that's when the arguments, the divorce cases, the legal action all starts, right?
Well, Kirk famously, the Nirvana had a 3-way split. And then when they got successful, Kurt Cobain changed his mind, said, I just felt like I was entitled to it. So he took the lion's share of the money. So,
wow.
That
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it can go sour. Anyway, enough of that. But yeah, just so you'll know where you stand. And then it's a question of sort of parking your ego, because you'll both be coming to a project with a ton of ideas, but you need to be able to listen to each other's ideas. And I find it's good to have there's no such thing as a stupid idea rule, just throw it in. And, they were talking about, they have Heide and Iain have a go crazy document, which is a place to throw ideas down, which I love. And I think being receptive to that, because even the mad ideas, the stupid ideas, the bonkers ideas, there's usually something in there that you can use. I'm a big fan of pushing until something breaks. And then you come back and you go, well, actually, that little thing that we spoke about, that actually works really, really well. So yeah, I think that is essential. And just having a document where you can put stuff down and just share stuff. And these days, the technology is there. If it's, something like shared documents or Dropbox or whatever, there's a great way of doing it. One of the things Rowan and I have started doing is we have meetings on Zoom. We record the meetings and we don't write anything down. We just chat. We just spitball ideas. And then once we've finished the meeting, I'll listen to the recording and I'll make notes as I go. And it's amazing how much I forgot of that initial meeting. It's definitely worth maybe doing an audio recording of these things. I mean, famously, there's stuff online. You can listen to the conversation between, I think it's George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, and Lawrence Kasdan, and I think Philip Kaufman, talking about Indiana Jones and what should happen in Raiders of the Lost Ark. And weirdly, a lot of the stuff they talk about ends up in the second film, and some even ends up in the third film as well. So, you'll come up with more ideas than you can possibly use. You'll forget half of them, but by listening back to it and writing it down.
Here's a little time-saving tip for you, Mark, based on a little conversation we had offline yesterday.
Yes.
I've discovered with ChatGTP 4.5, turn on the beta plugins thing that currently they've just launched. I found a plugin yesterday where, I'll take you through the process. You record it on Zoom and you save your transcript automatically to otter.ai, which we also use in the podcast. So you got your transcript. You then take that transcript and you can now put a PDF into ChatGTP and ask it to summarize the PDF, and it will summarize all the main points of everything that you discussed. And then that could be your starter point. And then you can ask it for time codes of those. And then you could dive straight into the recording if you wanted to make extra notes. But that would be a massive, because sometimes when I'm having Zoom meetings at the moment, sometimes they're like 2-3 hours. And it's like when you really get into it and you're like, and that's a lot of work, go back through everything. But really technology is really going to help us with this distilling of information, which is mind blowing to me right now, what I'm discovering as I play with it.
Yeah. So listen to each other, trust each other as well. Trust each other I think it helps to maybe define roles as well. Play to your strengths,
Yeah.
So if one of you has a particular strength for plotting, if one of you has a particular strength for dialogue, or if it's a mixed gender kind of partnership, maybe the woman writes the woman parts, the man writes the man parts, and then you swap them over. That kind of thing. So
the man writes the man parts and the woman writes the woman parts.
Listening back to that now, I regret my choice of words. But it should be the
other way around, shouldn't it?
Don't go there.
Sorry, this is the extended after all. But anyway, do carry on.
But yes, trust each other, but also keep challenging each other as well. Just keep saying, can this be better? Can this can this be better? I mean, one of the things. The way that we worked with Back to Reality, it was the book that never slept, wasn't it? Because you're in Canada, I'm over here in the UK. So I would write, I'd hand it to you, and then I'd get a bunch of notes from you the next day, sort of challenging me to do better, which was it was like getting notes from your editor every bloody day. It was like, what now?
It was one of my favourite moments of the day because of the way that our time zones are set up. I would wake up to the latest stuff that you'd done. So it'd be like my favorite thing. I'd wake up in the morning it's like Christmas morning every morning. I'm like, right, what we got this morning? And I'd flick it open. I'd usually do it actually, weird enough, I wouldn't even get out of bed. I'd be getting my phone back in the days when I had the phone beside my bedside table, which is a no-no now. I don't do that. I used to reach for my phone and I'd open it up and I'd flick and I'd be responding to you at 7 in the morning with putting comments in. But that's one of the other brilliant things about collaborating is it keeps the momentum going, because you don't usually get stuck as a collaborating group. You do get stuck as individual writers, of course. We will hit these dead ends, but you keep kind of like riffing off each other, and it just keeps the whole train on the tracks moving forwards, which is huge.
Yeah. I mean, Iain and Heide, they said Iain is the plotter, Heide is the pantser, and they said we smush our methods together. So over time, they found a way to make that work. But yes, and pick your battles. There will be times when you will be challenged and you think, actually, no, I actually want that. Fight for what you want. Pick your moments. Don't resist everything. I think if you're resisting everything, then you'd just be putting up barriers to everything. You've got to be receptive, but also you got to, pick the hills that you die on. There will be moments where you think, actually, because one of the things was we'd be in the first few chapters of Back to Reality, and I'd be writing stuff, and you began, but why is that there? I'd say, well, actually, I think that's going to pay off 10 chapters from now, but I'm putting that there now just so it's one of the reasons we did such a big outline in the end, because we had to know we were both singing from the same hymn sheet. It was being receptive, but also knowing when to say, actually, there's a reason this is here. So trust me on this.
Yeah. I think as well with things like that, you often need to put them into incubation sometimes for a little bit, because oftentimes when you're really attached to something, and this goes back to whether you're writing your own book or whether you're collaborating, but when you're really attached to something, in that moment, you're emotionally attached to it, and then you'll fight for anything that you're emotionally attached for. But when you give it a couple of days and you look back on it and you think, why was I so concerned about that? Or why was I so kind of like grasping onto that, not wanting to let go? And it's a bit like if you've had a ding dong with someone and then you think about 3 or 4 days later and you think, oh, what did we actually argue about? And you can't even remember the thing that it was just you both got in that state. And I'm not saying that like when you write, it's always about arguments. It's not, but there are always, you've got to be prepared. There will be, because you're both so heavily invested in it and you both want the same thing, which is you want it to be the very best book. There will be points of contention and conflict. And I think that's one of the benefits of writing together, because you don't have those debates when you're in your own mind. You just do what you want. And actually, you don't then see that, oh, that's actually not going to work, or that's not a great idea, or this could be done differently. And I think that's why collaborations do work. But you've got to find somebody that like you say, you can be open and honest with and know that it's not going to break the relationship down the road. And that's the other part of collaboration, is it's not just finding someone who can write and saying, let's write a book together. It's about someone you can write with. And that's absolutely crucial. I think that's why, I mean, we've been doing the podcast now, for 6 and a bit years. It's some way proof in the pudding that we could write a book together. And the fact we did the podcast, kept the podcast going after we wrote the book, was testament to the fact that, and in some ways, Mark, weird question, but had we have not written the book together, would the podcast have lasted as long as it had done? Was that kind of in some ways a bit of training for us to collaborate effectively, like moving forward on this?
Because, we originally talked about writing a book each and having a kind of race, didn't we? But then,
we did,
That idea didn't last very long. But
no.
But the flip side as well of working with someone else is they're also your cheerleader and can be a sounding board. They can tell you that, oh yeah, that's great. Do more, do more of that. And yes, that is funny. That is a funny bit, or yes, that is thrilling, or whatever. So
and that happens more often than the challenges, which is worth pointing out as well. It's not all struggles. It's a lot of the times you're coaching each other through the process in many ways. And I love it. I mean, for me, it was such a brilliant experience. It was great. They also like their spreadsheets, don't they, Mark? I think there's a space for spreadsheets in every collaboration. I mean, I know I'm the spreadsheet geek in some ways, but I can really relate to that in terms of, just being able to distill ideas down into kind of structural ways. And they talked a lot about plotting.
That's how we came up with what we were going to write about when we were trying to decide.
Well, it's how we came up with what we were going to do the podcast on initially. Do you remember?
Yeah.
We used a spreadsheet, like, what things do you love? And that's how we decided what to do on the podcast. And then we did a version of that for the book. What things do we love that would, or it might have even been the same. Was it the same spreadsheet?
It might have been the same, two tabs.
It might have been an extension
spreadsheet, but it was, it's just that, we both liked science fiction and time travel, both like comedy, both like Douglas Adams, both, and that all kind of led and music and sort of all steered us towards the themes and the ideas that Back to Reality ended up being about. So if you're ever, at a loss of, well, I'd love to write with this person, but what have we got in common? Until you start pooling ideas together, you're never going to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. So, folks, if you've enjoyed this extended, please tell your friends, especially, I tell you what, if you want to collaborate with someone, get them to listen to this extended. Get them to listen to the interview with Heide and Iain. I'm sure it will be a really good basis for you to kind of start discussions around what you might want to do. And if anything comes from it, like if you do write a book, let us know. We'd love to tell the world about it, and how it stemmed from this discussion. So pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com and drop us a note if you found this useful. But please do tell your friends. And thank you so much. Whether you're in the academies, whether you're a patron, thank you so much for supporting this podcast. And we'll be back very soon with another extended. So, Mark, what's new in social media today?
Lots and lots of good news. Starting with the Academy, we've got Kay Vincent on the Academy. Kay says, I entered a micro-fiction competition a couple of months ago where participants have 24 hours to write a story exactly 100 words long. Have you ever tried? I've tried this. It's so hard. It's so hard. You think, 100 words. Yeah.
I struggle to even write a tweet, Mark.
Yeah, really quite. Well, it's not like Elon's making it easy for anyone, is it? But anyway, Kay says, but the other day I heard I got through to the second round. I've already submitted my second 100-word story, and I must admit that I got quite a good feeling about it. So fingers crossed that will get me through to the final round. Got everything crossed for you, Kay. Kay is great fun. Kay is, when we have the weekly surgeries, it's great having Kay around. Also on the Academy, Susan Holmes, finished my first draft. I finished the first draft of my psychological thriller. Needs a lot of work still, and I mean a lot. However, this is an achievement and further than I've ever got before. My life is littered with unfinished novels. Brilliant. I mean, that's what we want from the Academy, isn't it, Mr. D? This is what we set it up for.
Absolutely.
First drafts, finishing those, doing those things you've never, ever done before.
Exactly. It's all about reaching those milestones that you never thought possible, you maybe didn't think you could do by yourself, or if you're stuck. And Susie's testament to that. So congratulations, Susie. We are absolutely thrilled for you.
Jackie Kirkham over on the BXP team, she says, cover reveal. I've just started uploading my ebook to the various stores. So while I'm waiting for them all to go live, I thought I'd share my gorgeous cover with you. I'm so excited. I love the cover so much. So this is a non-fiction book called The Calm Place, Discovering Nature in a Year Like No Other by Jackie Kirkham. It is absolutely gorgeous. I'm going to put a link in the show notes to Jackie's website, because also when you sign up to a newsletter, you get this sort of this worksheet about nature, and it's just looking at the cover lowers my blood pressure. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. So do check that out. There'll be a link in the show notes for that, folks. You can check that out. Mr. D, another person. This is I think this is on YouTube actually. This is at WF Meyer, who says, Mr. D, I'm another who can turn off smell at will in the same way you do with the whole flap thing. It does have its benefits. This is astonishing. This is every week. Every week we got someone who's got this superpower. It's fantastic.
We should start documenting all these superpowers that people didn't realize they ever had, and create a whole website dedicated to them. I think it could be quite fascinating. But welcome to the club. That's 4 of us now that can turn off our smell at will. And if that doesn't make any sense to you, just listen back the last few weeks, because this is something that's probably going to keep running by the sounds of it.
Well, and likewise, it was our JD Kirk episode, and I'll put a link in the show notes, because I don't think we've had a response to an episode like that for so long. So over on the BXP team, Liam Saville, JD Kirk, he has aphantasia, which is where you can't picture things in your mind. And it's helped him become this incredibly prolific author. But he learned very late in life that he had it. And every week, again, we got people going, hang on, that was me. So over on the BXP team, we've got Liam Saville and Tanya Scott. They both discovered this. And what's lovely is they're both having a conversation, sharing their experiences about it and how it might help with their writing. So it's the episode that keeps giving. I'm just absolutely delighted by it. So thanks everyone for sharing that.
Absolutely brilliant stuff. And if you would like to share your work with the world, then if you're really struggling with your book, and who isn't, I mean, let's be honest, 200wordchallenge.com could be the answer to your prayers. It's like it's a free challenge that challenges you for the first week to try and write 200 words a day and then keep on going. And we've had so many incredible successes. In fact, Mark, I am going to put out a request for anyone who's written a book using the 200-word challenge, because we're going to feature those books and create a 200-word challenge list. A bit like NaNoWriMo. You know how NaNoWriMo's got all the famous books that were written? Well, we're going to do that with the 200-word challenge. Well, so if you're one of those people that have written a book, then...
Me, I am. I've done it.
Well, I know, starting with you at the top of the spreadsheet, Mark. But yeah, we'll stick up a form very shortly. And yeah, maybe you could put that in the show notes this week, Mark. And then we'll put it out there. If you've actually written a book using the 200-word challenge, fill the form out, and we will highlight your book amongst all the brilliant works of literary fiction and non-fiction that have happened. So, but yeah, 200wordchallenge.com is where you go to sign up for that. And if people want to find us on social media and out in the world, Mark.
So Facebook is Bestseller Experiment. Twitter and Instagram is at BestsellerXP. Now, at the time of recording, Meta Threads launches tomorrow. So I'm going to dip in and give that a go, because it ties in with Instagram, as I believe. Although when you say threads to someone of my vintage, I immediately think of the nuclear war film that came out in 1984. But I'm sure it won't be as bad as that. So yeah, we're gonna dip in and give threads a go, so to speak. So yeah, watch this space.
Excellent stuff. Brilliant. All right, folks, if you'd like to join our thousands and thousands of people that signed up to our weekly newsletter, pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com, click on the newsletter tab, and we will send you a weekly update of our latest episode with links and all the things we learned from it, plus lots of other exclusive bonuses and goodies if you sign up for that. So, Mr. Stay, have a great week, and I will see you very soon, shorter than you would ever know, as we dive into our next episode. And thank you so much, folks, for joining us this week, and we hope you have a fantastic writing week. It's a goodbye from Mark 1.
And a goodbye from Mark 2.
Goodbye.